There is a stranger you have never forgotten. Someone you saw once. Maybe on a train, maybe on a street, maybe years ago. You never learned their name. You never spoke a word. And yet they are still there. We assume memory works like a camera. Important things get saved, unimportant things get deleted. A stranger you met for 30 seconds should not make the cut. But some do. And they stay for years. Decades sometimes. Long after people you knew for years have faded. This is not random. Your brain did not make a mistake. It was following a very specific set of rules. And once you understand those rules, you will start to see every brief human encounter differently. In 1966, psychologist Endel Tolving proposed something radical. He argued that the brain stores two completely different types of memory. Semantic memory, facts and information. And episodic memory, experiences with emotional context. The stranger you remember forever was never stored as information. They were stored as an experience, with feeling attached. And emotional memory has a completely different shelf life than factual memory. Facts fade, experiences with emotion do not. But emotion alone is not enough to explain it. Because you have had emotional experiences with hundreds of people. And most of them have faded too. Something else was happening in the moment you saw that stranger. Something your brain detected that it almost never detects. A specific combination of signals. Signal 1, the face did not match the context. The person looked different from everyone around them. Not necessarily beautiful, not necessarily dramatic. Just somehow wrong for the setting. And your brain flagged it. Because throughout evolution, anything that did not fit the pattern was potentially important. Potentially a threat, potentially an opportunity. Either way, pay attention. And the attention itself began the memory formation. But there was a second signal. And this one is stranger. More personal. Researchers at the University of California found something in 2012. When we encounter a new person, the brain instantly and unconsciously scans them. Not for their face, not for their name. For something called interpersonal resonance. A kind of frequency match. The brain is asking one question. Is this person like something I already know? Like a dream you half remember? Like something you wanted and never got? Like a version of yourself you left behind? The match does not have to be conscious. It just has to register. And when it does, the brain does something it almost never does. With anyone, it opens a file that is supposed to stay closed. A file labeled unfinished. And that is when the stranger stops being a stranger and becomes something your brain cannot let go of. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik Effect applied to people. Bluma Zeigarnik was a Soviet psychologist who discovered in 1927 that the human brain holds on to incomplete things more tightly than completed ones. A finished task gets filed and forgotten. An unfinished task stays active in working memory, running in the background, waiting to be closed. And a stranger you never spoke to is the ultimate unfinished task. There was no beginning, no middle, no end. No conversation, no introduction, no resolution. Your brain opened a file the moment it detected that resonance. And then the train left, or the moment ended. And the file never closed. So it stays in working memory. Indefinitely. Not because the person was special, but because the story has no ending. And here is where it gets more personal. The resonance your brain detected often corresponds to something you have not resolved in yourself. A researcher named John Bowlby called this attachment echo. The brain seeks completion of old emotional patterns. In new people it encounters, the stranger reminded you of something. Something unfinished inside you. Not something you did, not something they did. Something you never got to become. Or someone you never got to meet. Or a version of a story that was interrupted. And your brain kept the file open, because closing it would mean accepting the story ended. Before it began, that is the stranger you still remember. That is why. So what do you do with this? Is there a way to close the file? The answer is yes, but it requires understanding something uncomfortable. The stranger is not really about the stranger. They were a surface. Your brain projected onto them. Everything they felt like. Everything they reminded you of. Everything you needed them to represent. Without ever giving them the chance to be a real person. Without ever knowing if the resonance was real or invented. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio called this somatic marking. The body tags certain moments with feeling before the mind can evaluate them. The stranger got tagged. Your body decided they mattered, before you had a single piece of information about them. And once tagged, the brain builds a story around them. Not from real information, from your own unresolved material. Your own hopes, your own patterns, your own open loops. This is why the stranger feels meaningful. They are meaningful, just not because of who they are, because of what you brought to the moment. The file closes when you stop asking who they were and start asking what they pointed to in you. What did that moment feel like you were about to have? What story were you hoping would begin? What part of you recognized something in them? Answer those questions honestly, and the file starts to close. That stranger on the train was never really about the train or the stranger. They were a mirror your brain held up at exactly the right moment to show you something it had been trying to show you for a long time. If this made you think of someone specific, sit with that for a minute before you scroll. And next, what happens inside your brain when you are completely alone? That one will stay with you,